With the release of Marvel's Avengers almost here, we have to ask ourselves, what happened to movie tie-in games? It used to be that every huge blockbuster would have a game release alongside it. Iron Man, Batman Begins, even B-Movie.
Beekeeper? He keeps bees?
And yet today's video game market seems to be dry of Hollywood's touch. There are still some hanging about, however, but where did the rest go? From dumping games into the desert to dragging studios into bankruptcy, let's take a look at what happened to the culture of movie-licensed video games. Gone are the days of leaving a movie theater with an itch to taste just a little bit more of that movie you were gawping at moments ago, and satisfying that very itch by picking up a movie tie-in game of the exact same name. With the billions of dollars that recent movies have been making, we have to stop and think, isn't that just crazy? I mean, look at Avengers Endgame. The highest grossing movie of all time went without a movie tie-in game to go alongside it. And that movie is filled with fights and battles that you'd have to admit would fit into a game pretty nicely. Movie licensed games have been around for as long as video games themselves. 80s movie classics such as Batman, The Terminator, and Indiana Jones all found their way into everyone's home consoles. It seemed easy enough to have a successful movie tie-in game. Have accurately designed characters, intricately designed levels, and most importantly, fun gameplay. Though if you really wanted to be daring, you could avoid all three of those important components, which is exactly what happened with E.T. The E.T. tie-in game is most famous for being one of the worst video games ever to be created. An endless affair of terrible gameplay mechanics and falling into pits. In fact, E.T. was such a big flop that it is cited as one of the main causes of the video game industry crisis of 1983. Atari had so many leftover E.T. cartridges that they ended up dumping them all into a New Mexico landfill site, which was later dug up by a large gathering of fans. Here begins a theme we will see throughout this video, as critics often blame the game's poor quality on the short development time. Skipping ahead into the 90s, we have Goldeneye, one of the most influential video games of all time. Developed by Rare, Goldeneye was originally going to be a side-scrolling platformer on the SNES, but Rare shifted their focus onto being a first-person shooter instead. The most interesting thing about Goldeneye's release is it didn't actually release alongside the movie, but in fact a whole 2.5 years later, just before the movie's sequel, Tomorrow Never Dies, was hitting theaters. The fact that Rare had so much time to develop the game clearly helped to make Goldeneye the success it was. It sits quite comfortably being the third highest-selling N64 game of all time, just behind Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64. Ultimately, this game is symbolic of a time when people played video games together, a statement that proves how a movie tie-in game can be revolutionary. The 2000s gave us games for Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and the very popular open world of Spider-Man 2. Treyarch had perfected their free roam web-slinging, which would be used for years to come. Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith was another popular game around this time. The lightsaber combat and dual modes made for great gameplay, and they even let you finish the iconic finale with an alternate ending. The 2000s could be considered the peak of movie tie-in popularity, but not all franchises could survive in this market. In 2005, Batman Begins hit the cinema screens, and along with it, a tie-in game from EA. Fans of the Caped Crusader could play a game that followed the movie's plot quite closely, but was considered to be clunky and too mechanical. It did, however, feature the voices from the movie's cast.
Show me you have the wisdom to be ruthless.
After average reviews, Pandemic Studios, who had just recently been acquired by EA, took it upon themselves to be more adventurous with their next project, an open-world game for the next movie in the series, The Dark Knight. This is where the struggles of creating a movie-licensed game really came to the surface, as The Dark Knight's game scored a low review rating of not existing. That's right. Pandemic went through so many difficulties trying to meet the deadline of the movie theater and Blu-ray release that EA canceled the project. This was due to Warner Brothers failing to deliver movie concepts on time, as well as Pandemic's new open-world engine failing to run their Batman assets smoothly. Because of this, EA reportedly missed out on $100 million in potential revenue for not releasing a Dark Knight video game. This, once again, comes down to the studio being given such short development time. This did end up being a positive for future gamers, however, as the rights reverted to Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment, who went on to release the critically acclaimed Batman Arkham series. Though DC's luck with the video game industry had fallen short, it was now Marvel's turn to have a crack at it. 2008 saw the birth of the MCU, and along with it, Marvel and Sega were striking a deal to release movie tie-in games together. Releases for Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, Iron Man 2, and Captain America all made their way onto consoles. Though the Incredible Hulk gameplay was popular with fans, all of the Sega tie-ins were seen as disappointments. Repetitive missions, repetitive enemies, or constant waves of missiles in Iron Man's case. There was just an overall cheap feel to them, which was now synonymous with movie-licensed video games.
You'll never change, Tony.
Why should I?
After the release of Captain America Super Soldier, Sega and Marvel parted ways. It was now up to THQ, who swooped in to try their hand at making a game for the upcoming Avengers movie. The game was pitched as a third-person action game and was to have very little connection to the plot of the movie. We would see a wider range of heroes taking on the Skrulls, whom we wouldn't get to see in the MCU until 2019's Captain Marvel. Though the early development was going well, THQ wanted to change their entire approach to the gameplay. Marvel fans still had a bitter taste in their mouths when it came to third-person superhero games, and so it was decided that the Avengers game would focus on first-person instead. Players would be able to enjoy four-person online and split-screen co-op, interchanging between their favorite Avengers. Everything seemed to be going right with the project. That was until THQ fell into a financial crisis. The company was losing out on millions due to the poor reception of their Homefront game, as well as declining sales from their U-Draw game tablet. Before filing for bankruptcy, THQ had one option left, and that was asking Marvel to help fund their Avengers project. Sadly, Marvel declined, and the Avengers game was no more. The Avengers wasn't the only billion-dollar movie in 2012 to be without a tie-in game. Skyfall, The Hobbit, and The Dark Knight Rises were all lacking a video game on store shelves. And yet, each of these franchises were producing games just a few years earlier. So what were studios doing instead? Publishers learned that after buying into a movie license and paying their studios to create a full game for consoles, it ultimately resulted in below-average games that rarely made a profit. Console games were put on the back burner, and the culture of mobile games became the best way forward. Iron Man 3, the official game, was created in 2013 by developer Gameloft. And unlike most other games about Marvel properties, this game was a mobile exclusive title. Just like the extremely popular game Temple Run, Iron Man 3 is an endless runner type game. This means that each level will continue until the player takes too much damage. Is this game an improvement on the previous Iron Man games that fans would play on their consoles? Not in the slightest. Is it much cheaper to create, reducing the risk of companies losing out on millions? It sure is. Movie tie-in mobile games were coming into full force now. They were almost always free, and pretty much the graphics and gameplay of an HD PS1 game in your pocket. So again, not groundbreaking stuff, but they did the job when it came to giving you a feel of the movie they were tied to. Well, not all of the time, as they would also be reskins of popular puzzle games like Candy Crush. Titles such as RoboCop, Jurassic World, Kingsman, Finding Dory, and The Hunger Games were all leading the line for movie tie-ins. Mobile games made up a 60% revenue for the global video game market in 2019, generating $49 billion in revenue and a profit of $16.9 billion. Some studios didn't even feel the need to make a mobile game at all, and instead would release a DLC to already existing games, like DC Legends obtaining Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman around the time of the movie's release. More examples include the Batman v Superman Batmobile showing up in Rocket League, and also Zen Pinball 2, a game that would often have their pinball machines themed around whatever movie was in current need of promotion. The most famous example of this, however, would have to be the addition of Thanos into this mildly popular and totally unheard of battle royale game known as, Fortnite? This was part of a cross-medium promotion between Disney-owned Marvel and Fortnite developer Epic Games. In return, Fortnite appeared in that strange but sweet Avengers Endgame scene.
Noob master.
We have to think that mobile games are where the movie tie-in will live from now on. The process of creating a movie is already complicated enough. It's too much pressure on a game studio to spend lots of cash on a movie license, to then await ever-changing movie concepts, and to build a compelling game by the time the movie is out in theaters. We'll still get some surprises along the way though, much like 2015's Mad Max. Both the film and the game exceeded expectations, with the game scoring comfortably well among critics. If movie tie-ins want to keep existing on the console, then they need to break away from the format of releasing alongside the movie. The Godfather, Scarface, Back to the Future, and Ghostbusters are all examples of games that released many years after their movies hit theaters. So much care has been put into these games, and that is thanks to the lack of a strict movie deadline. When we pick up a movie game, we want to be taken back to the same feeling we had while watching it. The cheap feeling of endless brawls with the same enemies and levels copied over and over and over again is something we want to avoid. We've also had our fair share of terrible TV tie-ins, but from Simpsons Hit and Run to the more recent SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, we can still count on a surprise success from the TV side of things. And let's not forget that the LEGO games have been steadily producing their own take on the movie tie-in for many years, with the Skywalker saga expected to drop later in the year. Which brings us to the upcoming Avengers game. The design of the game seems to be taking heavy influence from some of the MCU's imagery. And of course, the comics too. We'll see Miss Marvel on a campaign to reunite the Avengers and uncover what was behind the A-Day attack. Could this be a staple in inspiring more movie-themed games to release after the movie has been and gone? We can only hope. Do you wish that movie tie-in games make a comeback on consoles? Did you have a favorite movie game growing up? Be sure to let us know in the comments if so. And be sure to subscribe to The Gamer if you fancy seeing more videos like this one. Bye for now.